Hello and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
I'm Dave.
And I'm Philip.
Apparently you're Brina, though.
Oh, I'm Brina.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
I'm really organised today. There we go. I've sorted that out as well. So yes, hello and welcome everybody. I hope you enjoyed the pre-stream mix. I had a lot of fun doing it today. I think I got really lucky with my tune selection. But yeah, it was. It's always funny, isn't it? Sometimes you can try really hard, and it just all goes wrong. And tonight I was in a bit of a state of fuck it. And it turned out to be like really enjoyable. I mean, yeah, there you go. Sometimes taking the pressure off yourself is what you need.
Yeah. Well, you just go with the flow then.
Yeah, definitely. And how have you guys been? What have you been up to?
Mostly sleeping.
Nice.
Yeah, I second that.
Is that because Doggo's been keeping you awake, Dave?
Yeah, and we had builders taking down scaffolding across the road this morning, and it was very loud.
Annoying.
So I got woken up like 9 o'clock, yeah.
And what about you, Philip? What's been making you so tired?
Oh no, nothing in particular. Honestly, nothing particularly interesting is happening at the moment. So it's just sort of a normal good day, relaxed, and nothing particularly exciting.
It's winter time. It's hibernation time.
Yeah.
That is true.
I honestly enjoy the winter atmosphere anyway. So yeah, I'm sort of leaning into that.
Right, so tonight we're the Epicurean View on Death. Even though I just checked just beforehand because I'd already forgotten, I've forgotten again. That's good. It's showing that I'm really organised and on the ball tonight. You can imagine how the rest of this stream is going to go. At least the microphone is on, and you've heard me fumbling around rather than us just fumbling around in silence for 5 minutes. Oh dear. All right. So, yes, tonight we're going to be covering off the Epicurean view on death. Now, Dave, you originally suggested this topic, but Philip, you were also quite excited to do this one.
Yeah.
So which of you wants to start off?
I should probably start by explaining what the Epicurean view of death is.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Epicurus argued that death can't harm us, that when we're dead, we feel nothing, so therefore death is nothing to us. And his view comes from the fact that he was both an atomist and a hedonist. So for Epicurean, pain and pleasure are the only good and bad. So if you can't actually feel pain or pleasure, then nothing good or bad can happen to you. His view comes from his letter to Menoetius, and I've got it pulled up here, so I can actually give the proper quote. Hang on, my mouse is in the way. Okay. Become accustomed to the belief that death is nothing to us. For all good and evil consist in sensation, but death is deprivation of sensation. So death, the most terrifying of ills, is nothing to us, since so long as we exist, death is not with us. But when death comes, then we do not exist. It does not then concern either the living or the dead, since for the former it is not, and the latter are no more. He's very poetic, is Epicurus.
Yeah. It's quite beautiful, and I think the sentiments similar to that have been replicated throughout history by folks like Mark Twain and Alan Watts and all of that. It's a general thought that that people try and suggest to be the case. But is it just the case that they're pushing this to try and resolve themselves of their fear of death? Because in general, I mean, one of the reasons religion can be attractive is the fact that it often speaks about an afterlife. You know, it's something that we are looking at. So could we say that perhaps there are a number of ways that you can deal with this fear of thinking there is no afterlife? And one of them is to say, you know, things like death is basically the same as what it was like for you before you were alive. And what was that like to you? It was nothing.
That's another one that was kind of popular with the old Greek philosophers and those that believed there was only atoms and void, is that there was nothing to you for a millennia before you were born, and it will be the same after you die.
So, I mean, both the sentiments are pretty much the same thing, aren't they, really?
Yeah. And I mean, it's a popular thing within the atheist community today to say, I'm not afraid of death, I'm afraid of dying.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, I think that's fair. I mean, I'm far more scared of how I'm going to die, what it's going to be like to die, the pain that, you know, if it's a long and slow death, the pain that it will not only cause me, but the others around me, and so on and so forth. So I can understand that sentiment. The act of dying and the thinking about dying and thinking about being no more even can be quite overwhelming to people.
Yeah.
That's the existential crisis.
Yeah. Like, to me, I don't know if it works for me as a sort of way to fear death less, in some sense. Like, for me, it's the opposite almost, right? I find it pretty convincing as a way of reasoning, I'm not gonna lie, but it doesn't do much to relieve me of my fear of death. So, like, it might sound like a good coping mechanism, but for me, it's not. It's more like a thing that I think it might have something to it. I think it makes sense. I mean, there are some caveats, but I think in general it makes sense. So yeah, that's sort of the way where I stand on this.
I'm the same. Yes, I fear dying because, let's face it, dying can be quite painful. But if you die suddenly, you know, you're not going to know you're dead.
Yeah.
But I do kind of agree with the sentiment that people like Kagan and Nagel say, that death can actually harm you. And it's that harm that I kind of fear.
Okay, yeah, I think we should, I guess we should discuss this idea that is underlying it, right? Which is the sort of idea that all harm and all good and all pleasure, in some sense, lives in your experience, right? And so the idea would be that if you are not able to experience it, whatever that is, then you cannot be harmed and you cannot, you know, have pleasure because you're not experiencing anything. So there's no domain within which you can be harmed or sort of have pleasure in that particular environment, I guess. So what do you guys think of this? Is it possible to harm someone without him being aware of anything that you're doing that supposedly harms this person?
I think to answer that question, you have to think about what you mean by harm, and if you think, as you say, it has to be in someone's experience, or if there can be a harm done that you don't know about at all. So, you know, say if someone stole something from your attic, but you were never aware of it, and it's something you never looked at before, have they done a harm to you? An example that Dave brought up the other day, which was actually quite good, and I was doing my best not to give my opinion on either way, just explain it a bit more for Luke. was also really, really good. So, Dave, do you want to go ahead and explain that one, and we can have a chat about it?
Okay, so the idea of this is you have a distant relative and you don't know they exist and you've never met them and you've never known they exist, but they are immensely wealthy and they die and they leave a huge fortune to you in their estate. Now, they give it over to the lawyers to find you and execute their will, only the lawyers are a bit greedy. And they know that you'll never know that you've been left this money. You'll never know your relative has died. So they embezzle the money and take all the money. So you never know that you've lost this money, but you have lost this money. Have you been harmed by them stealing the money?
That's a very good question.
So, and I think this can be looked at, you can probably look at it in a number of different ways, but two main ways. On the one hand, your experience of your life hasn't changed at all. So you could argue that no harm has been done at all because your life isn't any different. However, you've been robbed of the potential to improve your life and the life of those around you. At which point you have a loss, even though you don't know you've lost it. And the fact that your life could be better and it stays the same, you could easily argue that that is a form of harm. And I think I would actually lean that way. You know, even though I'm not aware of this money that was coming to me, I would say that perhaps I have been harmed because I've been robbed of the opportunity to improve myself. You think about it at work. I mean, bring it down to something people might have experienced. You're going for a promotion, someone else is going for a promotion. Unbeknown to you, someone starts telling lies to the manager who's going to give you a promotion. You don't get the promotion. You don't know why. You're given some excuse about experience, but actually you haven't got the job. Have you been harmed? And I think that's a bit more of a real experience for someone to go and go, oh, actually, yeah, I have been harmed in that instance because I could have been better and I might have been deserving to be better. But because of the lies someone told, even though you don't know that these lies have happened, I have been harmed.
Sorry, Philip, you go ahead.
No. I was just enjoying the conversation so far.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Well, you go ahead first. I'm going to bring it back to hedonism in a second, but
yeah. So I tend to agree with all of you on this point, right? I think you can be harmed even if you're not aware that you're being harmed. I think this is, I mean, it's something that seems fairly intuitive to me that there can be something that you're not aware of that is harming you. But I think it's sort of at a service to stop here, because I think there is another sort of level. It's not just about this thought of, is your awareness of it making it a harm or not, right? There are multiple levels here, because you can still argue that when you say that someone harmed you in that case, right, and you weren't aware of it, but he still harmed you. And the reason why he harmed you is because if he didn't do that, right, then you would have had an experience that would have been beneficial. So it's still, at the end of the day, bottoms out in experience, after all, even if you're not aware of that, right? At the end of the day, what you're arguing is, had this been different, then I would have had an experience which would have been enjoyable, something like that. So at the end of the day, it still comes down to experience. It's just that sort of one step removed, right? Yeah. I don't think this is necessarily the way we think about death, right? Because there is an additional thing when it comes to death, right? It's not just that you're not aware of it, right? It's that you cannot make the same statement as you did, right? Like just now, you cannot say, oh, I would have had an experience which would have made it better for me or would have made it worse for me, right? You cannot say that, because when it comes to death, there is none of that. So it's not even in the potential sense can you say that for death. So I think there is still a distinction. It's not just about figuring out this thing about, can you be harmed or not when you're unaware of it? It's like there's an additional reason why death is different than all these other scenarios that
I think you're right.
we discussed.
But there is something you can also think about. It is with death, there is no more experience. So could we argue that any experience, or at least most experiences, are preferable to no experience? I'm sure we could argue that.
Yeah, but like I think there's sort of like another idea here, which is sort of being aware of having an experience, right? To some extent, you can think of that as well, because there is a distinct, like there is no state, at least if we accept this view on death, in which you're aware that you're not aware of anything, essentially, right? There is no state in which you're aware that you don't exist anymore. Essentially, you never reach that point. So I think when you say
depends what drugs you take.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Fair enough. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, honestly. It's a weird one for me.
It's definitely a weird one, and I think it's one of those things, because you can't experience death, you can't really actually fully qualify it. You can just give an approximation of what you think death is like, and death is like nothing, but what's nothing like? And
yeah. Exactly, right? Because I think a lot of people tend to visualize in their heads this idea, but this is just projection, right? In their own minds. It's this sort of timeline, right? Where you like exist in this timeline, and there is your experience, right? And at the end of it, there is a cliff, and then there is no experience, right? But the time continues to flow. And in some sense, this makes sense, right? Because to other people, that is exactly how it looks, right? But the point is, you never get to see that, right? You're never going to experience that timeline, right? The only time you're going to experience it is before that happens, right? But by projecting it into the future, by thinking about it, then it's sort of like that's as close as you can get to that thing. To you, like the end of the timeline is not like there's not anything after where you're experiencing the loss of anything. It's just nothing, essentially. So it's, yeah, I don't know.
Which is really hard to conceive of.
Yeah, it's really hard.
I'm going to address a couple of the comments as they've come into the chat, and then we can continue. So Mark says, if it lives in your experience, does it cease to exist when you die? Can it harm you after your death? And does that make any sense at all? So can something harm you after your death? Not only death being the harm, but can something harm you after your death?
I would say no.
I would say no as well.
Your reputation, maybe?
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
But that doesn't harm you, does it?
No, yeah. That just harms how people think of you.
Yeah.
So perhaps it harms other people's thoughts in that regard, but not you directly. So Paul says, I don't think I understand harm to include an unwittingly being robbed of opportunity, but it's close enough to accept that definition. We have his permission to continue. So I can understand that. I mean, it's when you're thinking about harm, generally we think about harm that we experience. And I think that is very intuitive. I think that is the most intuitive way to think of harm. And I don't think that people are wrong thinking about that. I would just say that perhaps, a lost opportunity is still a form of harm. The question is, does that apply to death? And I think that is the line. I think. I mean, do you all agree that perhaps in the millionaire example and the job, the promotion example, they're all things where you are being harmed even though you don't know that you've been harmed?
I would agree. Yeah,
I would, obviously, and there's a couple more examples like that to come. Just to add a little kick into power of it. But if we bring it back to hedonism, you could say that the good is receiving pleasure. And also, by the same symmetry, you could argue that good is reduction of pain. Yeah, so good is a reduction in the suffering that you would have. So to be harmed would be either to increase the suffering or to stop a decrease in the suffering.
So in that regard, if you're miserable at work and the promotion would make you happier, then you could still argue that that's a form of harm because you're not having that suffering decrease.
Yeah. So if you're living kind of a painful life and you die, that's a reduction in the suffering, isn't it? You no longer suffer. So death could be good in that sense.
Are you advocating, right, that we should kill everyone who's depressed?
It would depend. No.
He's trying to be diplomatic. We know that he wants to kill everyone. He's genocidal. We joke that it's me, but Dave's the real genocidal maniac.
Do I look like Dexter?
Maybe.
Me, evil.
That's why you get pleasure out of horror, isn't it?
Yep. That's why the Friday the 13th films are my favorite kind of film. But if we look at it like that, and we go back to, say, the lawyer example, and this is something that kind of Thomas Nagel puts forward. Imagine a person who is living quite a good life, and he's enjoying his life, and he suddenly has like a brain aneurysm or something like that. So it happens immediately, and he slips into a coma. He no longer has experiences. He feels neither good or bad pleasure. It's unlikely that he's going to come out of the coma. Has he been harmed by that brain aneurysm?
No.
What if... Okay, let's throw in another thing. What if he had a long-lost daughter who he hadn't spoken to in 20 years because of something bad, and they'd made up by correspondence, and that next week he was about to meet that daughter he hadn't seen in years? Has slipping into the coma harmed him?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, intuitively, both. I would say yes to both.
Well,
examples.
A coma to death, I wouldn't, because if you're in a coma, you're not having any experiences and you're not waking up. You're essentially saying you're in a vegetative state, aren't you, Dave?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say a vegetative state to death is a form of harm because there's no change. There's
No. Not going from vegetative state to death.
But from life to a vegetative state.
Life to a vegetative state.
Oh, I misunderstood that. In that regard, then yes, because I'd say you're being robbed of the potential to improve anything. So in that regard, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said vegetative state to death. In which case, what's the difference between the two? You know,
there isn't. That's the point of Nagel's example.
Yeah. But yes, I would agree with you. Life to the vegetative state, then it would be harmed. I'm sorry, I misheard the question.
That's all right. So in one way, you could say that harm is the deprivation of future goods.
Yes,
yeah, fair enough.
Which is something you could say about death, which is something I was going to say, what did I say earlier, about you're being robbed from the potential experience. You know, you're suddenly getting no experiences. You're being robbed of potential new experiences. You could argue that some people might actually have no good experiences left in their life. You know,
hence why I bring up the example where death could sort of be good.
Yeah,
I mean, if you've been kidnapped and you're being tortured and there's no way out for you and every day is constant suffering, it might be better that you pass away from the torture.
Yeah. So there are a few comments. I will wind back to some of the earlier comments in a minute, but this one's relevant. I've just seen come in. Mark says, not necessarily. I've read that a coma is a state in which you can't communicate with the outside world, but you're not totally senseless. There are different types of comas, which I think should be brought to the front there. And yes, you can argue that there are some comas that you are still having an experience. There are people who say they dream in comas. There are people that say they don't have any experience in comas. And there are people who have no brain activity going on and are in that complete vegetative state. And there's no real difference between them in that state and death. So you're right that not necessarily, but it's, types of coma are probably a spectrum, and maybe there is a clinical term for each type of coma that I'm not aware of. I'm not a medical professional.
Neither am I.
Maybe we should get my brother on because he is
kind of irrelevant to the thing, right? Like, I think the point was, like, even if there was no such thing as this coma, right? Like, just imagine that there is a coma that's like that, right? At that point. It's about the thought experiment of trying to think of this scenario and then figuring out what your intuitions are on the matter.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So coming back to a couple of earlier comments before we continue as well, Mark also says, does that bring into things that you're deserving of something that has been denied or stolen from you? Which I think is quite a good question. What do you think of that, Dave? So
do you deserve to have something to be stolen from you?
No. That has been stolen from you. So say, for example, you were going to get that promotion. You didn't get that promotion because of someone lying about you or whatever. So they've essentially stolen your promotion from you. And, are you deserving of that? And equally, something that's been stolen from you. So say if I came round your house and I stole your laptop, are you deserving of a laptop?
Well, if it's my property and you steal it, then yes, I'm deserving of that laptop because I've worked and I've got it, and and you stealing it from me sort of breaks a social contract. And in the case of deserving the job promotion, well, in a meritocracy, if you were the one that worked hardest and you were the one that deserved that promotion and it was going to be given to you, then somebody coming along and lying and making you not get that promotion, you were deserving of it because you were going to be given it. But either way, even if we remove the deserve thing, you would still have harm done to you because you would be deprived of future goods.
So in regard to the laptop, though, you're deserving of the laptop, but you're deserving of the laptop in general or from me?
Sorry, you keep cutting out the last bit.
So, sorry, Dave. I said, so in regard to the laptop, say I stole it from you, and obviously you agree that you're deserving of a laptop in that regard. But are you deserving of the laptop in general or from me?
I'm sorry, that's kind of confused. Because if you're stealing the laptop, then it's not you giving me a laptop and I don't deserve a laptop from you. It's just that you don't deserve to steal my laptop.
Correct. Yeah, no, I understand that. But so if something has been stolen from you, do you deserve that thing? Should it be replaced? Are you deserving of it from society or whatever?
Oh, well, if you steal it, then yes, I'm deserving of you giving it back because it wasn't yours to take it to begin with.
But you're not deserving of it from anyone else.
If they stole my laptop, yeah.
Yeah, no. I stole your laptop in this instance. You're only deserving of it back from me. You're not necessarily deserving of it from anyone else. You don't have the right, because I've stolen your laptop, you don't have the right to go and take a laptop of equal value from anywhere else. It should only be, say, maybe from me.
From you, yeah. Or at least that's the way I would say it.
Hopefully that answers your question, Mark. I know I put a lot of extra stuff on there, but I figured there might be some additional questions you had coming off of Dave's response. So, yeah. Cafe says, shout outs to DMT, which can allow you to experience perhaps not literal death, but an ego death. Cafe, when you're free.
It'll make it through the post because it's not that strong of a smell.
So Peace and Wealthseeker saying, I don't think there's anything bad about death. And that is because I also believe our souls are not of this realm solely. I don't even know if that was intentional, but well done. I would say that the point of this stream, we're obviously approaching it from an atheist perspective where we don't have souls. So we're looking at this view about death where nothing is going to continue. And we did mention at the beginning that, we understand that, religion can give you that comfort that there is something, whether it's reincarnation or some form of heaven, Valhalla, so on and so forth. There is a lot that you can gain comfort from with religion that can make you feel not very comfortable, but more comfortable with death, at least your own death. Maybe not someone else's because you'll still miss them, but you'll feel comfortable with your own, and you might find comfort in the fact that you will see this person who has died again as well, I guess. So there is comfort you can get in that regard, but atheists like us don't have such nice warm and fuzzy stuff to go on. We have to deal with...
just being an atheist doesn't mean that you don't believe in an afterlife, although it is highly likely that you don't, I would say. But it doesn't necessarily entail that there is no afterlife. It doesn't necessarily entail that there is no supernatural either. But it's just about a single proposition, so you might have a different view on that. But I think we were also just discussing the Epicurean view of death, and that was his view, and so that's what we are sort of playing around with, not necessarily, although I think we all share the same concept roughly of death as well.
I mean, my sister is an atheist, and she believes in a sort of heaven and a sort of hell where child molesters go and get punished. And so I agree with Philip.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
that they get punished as well. That's
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know of atheists that believe in sort of reincarnation to some extent, right? I also think that, I don't know, I met people that say stuff like, if the future is infinite, then every combination is going to happen again of matter, essentially, sort of a very physicalist perspective. But if that's the case, then you and I are going to be here again having the same conversation. So at some point in the future, because infinite time into the future means that as much as there's going to be huge numbers of combinations of matter, that they're all going to appear again at some point in the future, something like that, right? That's also something that I've heard. So
stay tuned, folks. We're going to be boring you with the same shit again in about 1 million years.
Who's to say this is the first time we've had this discussion?
Yeah, maybe it's the infinite amount of times we've had this discussion, and so we're going to be here again. And so I don't know, that's maybe a way to think of death that is sort of not, I guess, the end of things on a physicalist perspective. Of course, if you have different views on philosophy of mind and stuff, that might change depending on how you view things there. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that can sort of alter your view of death, I guess.
Mark has another question saying, does that bring intentionality into the idea of harm? I think you're getting more into the realm of morality with that question. I think there can be harms that don't have any intentionality there as well. you could trip and fall and knock someone out just by accident, and there's no intention there, but you've still hurt them, and you could argue that it wasn't immoral to do so because it was done completely by accident, or you could go with a incredibly pure consequentialist nature and say, well, you've still resulted in a bad result. But let's probably stay away from the morality side of things for now, because as much as we love the topic, I think we should focus. Paul says, was harm done if you are denied a promotion due to a relevant truth being exposed? Now that is a good question. So the example I gave before was if someone lied about you and you lost the promotion due to someone making shit up about you, basically. What if someone told something true about you and it was a really negative thing? It's not something like, I mean, I know in America and stuff like that, employment law, they can really discriminate against you. For example, oh, so and so's pregnant, and you can lose the job. And I think that there is still harm done there, because you shouldn't be discriminated against just because you're pregnant. But a relevant truth, or even an irrelevant truth perhaps, being exposed, some form of truth that you got denied the promotion for. Perhaps you didn't actually have the skills necessary. Are you still being harmed?
I would say to some extent, because you're being deprived of these future goods that you would have got without that truth coming out. But to some extent, you were hiding that truth, and, you know, perhaps it would have come out sooner and you wouldn't have had these future goods coming to you.
So
Yeah.
you weren't deserving
I think
of the promotion. So, but you still had the harm because you didn't have the promotion.
Yeah.
But you also weren't deserving of it.
Yeah, we have to draw a line, right? There's a sort of an ethical question here, and then there's whether or not you're being harmed. Yeah. I mean, someone can be harmed even if it is sort of the opposite in an ethical sense, right? Or even if it's right that they should be harmed in this sense, right? Like that's what I meant.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's hard to actually take harm away from ethics, isn't it? Like whenever you think about harm, ethical.
Yeah, it naturally leads essentially the conversation, but it's not inherent to the conversation that we are having now, I think.
No, it's not.
Although I'm excited because I think we can get into sort of. I think if you accept this view on death, there are some very interesting and worrying implications in terms of ethics that you might have to face. So it's that might be another avenue that we can explore.
Well, I mean, bringing it back to that question about, you know, a truth coming out and you losing your promotion and whether or not you were harmed. Imagine a bank robber who gets away with the crime, starts spending the money, and gets caught because he spent some of that money and the money is marked. And all that money is taken away from them and they're put in jail. Well, they've been deprived of a future good, so to some extent they've been harmed. But, you know, the question of ethics comes in. Well, do we just allow them to get away with it because we don't want to harm them?
Yeah.
Like Philip says, harm and ethics, they sort of blend together, but there's a distinction to be made here when we're talking about whether or not death harms you.
Yeah.
And Mark also brings up another point. He said it can also be argued that the person telling the truth was stopping the employer from being harmed by not knowing all the facts. Yeah. And that is a good point to bring up as well. You know, there is a sort of social contract you have, and actually a real contract. There's not supposed to be anything false on your CV. So in that regard, I think you're right there, Mark. You're also stopping the employer from being harmed by not knowing all the facts. And in the alternative example that was first given, perhaps there is also harm being done to the employer by the person telling lies about the person who should have been employed by it. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword there. So, yeah, no, you're right with what you're saying there.
I think we should maybe go back to the. So I think we all agreed, right, that in the scenario described by Dave, with the coma example, right, we all agreed that he was harmed in those examples, right?
Yep.
But I think maybe we should try to switch it over to the idea of fearing death, because that's slightly different, right? Because maybe there is a distinction there to be drawn. Is it always rational, I guess, or does it always make sense to fear scenarios in which you're being harmed, or is there like a special something about death that makes that sort of not that big of a deal?
I mean, I think it's natural to fear harm in general, isn't it?
I do think so as well. Yeah,
there might be certain forms of pain that you enjoy, and I'd probably separate pain from harm there. You know, you might find certain painful experiences enjoyable and therefore not being harmed by them.
Yeah, but
under hedonism, under hedonism, feeling pain, if the pain brings you pleasure, it's still counted as good because it's not pain, it's pleasure. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
But would it be, like, for example, even in the examples that some of you gave, for example, in the money example, right? Would it be, I guess, rational for you to fear that someone might, I guess, steal your money away from you, like in the entire complex, right? Sort of, would it be rational for you to fear that you might have an uncle or something or someone that you are unaware of, and that someone is going to prevent you from getting their inheritance through because you're not aware of them or something like that? I guess, like, I mean, we could all agree that scenario is harmful to the person, and even the person themselves would agree, right?
Play the odds.
That is that would be a harmful example, but I don't think that they should be sort of scared of it.
No, I agree.
No,
I
not
think
at
you
all.
should play the
the
odds
chances of it happening.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So there are other considerations that weigh in on sort of that was my entire point, right? That I wanted to make. There are other considerations, not just whether or not you classify something as harmful or not, whether or not you should be scared of it, but there are sort of other things that weigh into that. And I'm sort of asking this open-ended question whether or not there is something about death that
it's 100% going to happen.
Yeah. Okay.
So and it's permanent.
You consider, like, I mean, you could be afraid of crashing when you're on a plane trip, right? You're going, so you can afraid that your plane's going to crash, but you might not actually be scared of it unless you're actually on a plane that's about to take off. And at which point the thought comes to your mind, and you could think about the fact that actually recently there's been a lot of plane crashes and so on and so forth. It's at the front of your mind. It could still be quite irrational because statistically, being flying by plane is safer than going out on your car or on your bicycle or anything like that. So you could argue that fear that your plane is going to crash is more irrational, at least, than the people who aren't afraid when they get in their car and they drive off and they don't even think anything about it. Where's the line with the statistics, though? When you're in your car, you've gone out and you've driven every single day, and inductively, it's never happened to you. In a plane, it's never happened to you either, but you haven't. You don't fly as much as you do go in your car. So there's a bigger unknown, and the fear of the unknown is something that we all have.
Yeah. I think there's also something about not being in control when you're sort of in a plane that sort of contributes to that. But I think like there's a distinction between trying to explain why you sort of fear something and if it's rational to fear it, right?
Oh,
because
definitely.
I think, yeah.
And that's why there are phobias, because they are completely irrational fears. That's the thing. I mean, I know we will often say that emotions aren't rational things, but they're not necessarily irrational either. But an irrational fear is one that is completely out there. For example, I have a friend that the second he goes 2 steps up on a step ladder or anything like that, he's absolutely terrified. He's got a completely irrational fear of heights, right? But then there could be someone who is afraid to be, held out of a plane looking down like that. And they're like, oh my God, because actually there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that situation. I even have, say if I'm in an incredibly tall building and I'm looking out the window and the window sort of opens and I'm just like, oh, the whole time the window's closed, I'm okay. But the second I can lean out the window, I start feeling a little bit scared because I can actually fall out there. So you start adding probabilities in there. The whole time the window is closed and locked, it would be irrational for me to think, something's going to happen looking out this window. The second I can actually fall out of the window, okay, it still might be unlikely, but you're adding an extra dimension to something that can go wrong. And so with a plane, I guess you could say that, like you mentioned on the control front, if it's going to crash, there's pretty much nothing you can do about it.
Hence why you should take the Stoic approach.
Yeah, that's sort of another topic that we're sort of touching on here.
Yeah. I think you can sort of consider certain emotional responses to be rational or irrational. If you're watching the latest Freddy Krueger film and you start fearing that Freddy's going to come into your dreams and kill you, I would say that's kind of an irrational emotional response. Or if you're walking down an empty street and you can see everything ahead of you and you're worried that 2 people are going to jump out from behind a bin that doesn't exist and rob you and kill you, I would say that's a sort of irrational emotion. But if you're walking down a dark alley in Moss Side at like 1 a.m. and you're worried that somebody's going to jump out and rob you, that might be a slightly more rational fear.
Definitely. I mean, in that, you're playing the probabilities then. If you're in a high crime rate area, it's perfectly rational to be worried about being robbed or worse. But yeah, if you just sat in the back garden.
Yeah.
So I think there can be a sense of a rational fear of death. But I think if you spend all your day worrying that you're going to die, there's probably something slightly irrational going on. And possibly even a phobia. But I think it's okay to worry about dying. Because, it can happen. There's things we desire in the future. There's sort of, you could say death isn't intrinsically bad. But it's comparatively bad, especially if you have categorical desires in the future. Go back to the case with the guy going into the coma and he's about to meet his long-lost daughter the next week. Yeah. Your levels of fear of what might happen to you in between might increase, and that might be rational, but if it overtakes you, then perhaps you're fearing it a bit too much.
And that would be called thanatophobia. So thanatophobia is the irrational fear of death. So is that why Thanos was called as he was? I've never actually thought about his name, but he obviously brought death to half the universe. Maybe that's why. I mean, maybe they chose his name. I mean, a lot of the names and things like that have a lot of meaning behind them. And you'll find that in a lot of books you read and films you watch, that there is something more to the name than you're actually considering, and you just take it as read. But maybe that's why Thanos was called Thanos. If anybody knows, let me know.
He didn't irrationally fear death, though. He wanted to cause death.
But if thanatophobia is the irrational phobia is the death, so thanata it would be the death part of that. So maybe Thanos.
Yeah, I think the root could lead you to something in that, right? Phobia would be sort of fear, and sort of the thing before that should hint at what it means. So I guess there could be a connection there. What I wanted to, I guess, go back to for a second is like, as I think we all agreed that, for example, it is irrational to fear that that there is some evil lawyer out there. So go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't wait. I had to look it up. Thanos comes from the Greek. It's a masculine name and also a surname, and it comes from Athanasios, and it basically means immortal. So there you go. It sort of has something to do with death, but a lack of. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to continue the conversation on this idea that, we all agreed that it's sort of irrational to fear that there might be some evil lawyer out there that is sort of preventing you from getting the inheritance from your sort of uncle that you're unaware of, right? And as you both, I think, rightfully pointed out, that is based on the fact that it's not very likely that that's the case, right? But death is certain, right? It's pretty much the opposite of that. It's opposite. But at the same time, maybe what you should focus on is, because like combining it with what Dave said before, right? Like, because death itself, and I agree with Dave, should be sort of considered neutral, and it's sort of based on what life you're living that determines whether or not death is something good or bad, right? But then maybe what is not so certain is your evaluation of how your life is going to continue, right? Because if at the point at which you die, your life would have been brilliant afterwards, then effectively you should fear death in that scenario, right? But if it went downhill, then you should have been happy, right? Because that sort of ended the cycle at the right time. So maybe the thing that I'm asking, I suppose, is maybe what is not so certain is whether how your life would have how your life can continue. Your prediction ability of the future, and so maybe because of that, you should be more sort of cautious whether or not you fear death. Because if you're right and your life is great and it's looking great in the future, then you should fear death. But in all other cases, maybe it should lean towards neutrality, because you don't know how it goes unless you have good reason, I suppose, to think that it's going to go well from now on. So maybe it's directly proportional to the reasons you have for thinking that your life is going to be
for
great.
Continuing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a whole thing on suicide that comes from all this. It's all really interesting, but probably not the topic for, probably not the discussion for now.
Yeah.
There's part of the predictability of your life. You there's plenty of things that you can never really predict, can you? And that lack of predictability can lead you down different paths, shall we say. And you're right, Philip, your life could suddenly turn around and be better. I mean, you could be absolutely miserable now, and you could think me killing you would be doing you a service. But actually, tomorrow, you are given €1 million, and it improves your life no end. And perhaps that actually, if you had known that, you wouldn't have felt that death was an improvement of such. It's really, really hard to say. As you say, there's that evaluation that we all might have about our life. So we could say, evaluating now, death might be better or worse, but what we can't say is actually if it really will be better or worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess this opens up an entire can of worms as well, right? Because there are a lot of sort of philosophical views here that are very controversial as well. Wait a minute.
Whilst you're thinking, Mark says, in terms of death, are you doing someone the ultimate harm by torturing them and then killing them? They are now dead, and the harm that befell them before they died has now vanished. So that sort of ties into one of the earlier comments that was made by you, Dave, I think, in saying that actually if someone was absolutely miserable and feeling a lot of harm, that death would be an improvement to their life. So if you torture someone and then kill them, have you actually improved their life in some way?
If you were never intending to let them go, if you were never intending to let them go and were only going to keep torturing them every day, then yes, you have probably actually done them a service.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't shy away from the fact that you could prevent that state of suffering from happening in another very obvious way
simply by not torturing them. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's probably better things to do to someone than torturing them, but in the context,
just probably, yeah.
He also says that we shouldn't tell people that driving isn't safe because he's an Uber driver. In that case, can I book you? Can have this conversation real time whilst we're driving at high speed. There's a lot of chat going on about having a soul and things like that, which I sort of think is potentially irrelevant to the conversation we're having right now. So we'll carry on.
Yeah, I just wanted to. That's what the word that I was searching for. Like anti-natalism is a very sort of controversial like idea that surrounds this whole discussion on death. I mean, there are many things that we could go into here that are interesting, I suppose.
Just to bring up another one, Don Marquis. He's a philosopher who has extended the deprivation view. So sort of what we were talking about, the deprivation account, that if you're deprived of future goods, you've been harmed. And he's taken that and applied it to abortion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you could say that, though. There is someone who is denied future goods in that regard. But you could also apply it the other way. If you're potentially going to be born into a negative environment. Let's think of a worst case scenario where you'd be a crack baby and your parents are going to sell exchange the child benefit for drugs, and you're not going to have a good life, you're going to be abused and so on and so forth. Being brought into that environment, actually not being born at all, would be better than being born.
Okay, Schopenhauer.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. And there is sort of a distinct difference between the two in that in one account, you've already had an experience. There is a you there that is being deprived of future experiences and future goods. But in the case of an abortion, there is no you there.
Yeah.
There might be something that is deprived of future goods, but there is no person there.
Yeah, I've recently read a paper as well that was a bit fucked up to some extent, but
awesome.
Interesting nonetheless. That argued something similar, but applied it to this idea that there's the same argument could be used for stuff killing babies to some extent, right?
Yeah.
And because like in a way it's very hard to see the distinction between something that is obviously the location is different, but apart from that, you could make the same argument, right, that these entities do not have yet or haven't yet experienced anything. So I mean, it's a very sort of gray and controversial sort of area everywhere, and it's an interesting thing to discuss, but also like potentially triggering to some people, and so
Yeah.
It is, but then I think there's a reason why there is a limit on the age you can have an abortion up until, because that's when they say that you start to become sentient at a certain age, and you start to have feelings, as rudimentary as they might be. There is, and the fact that you might never, or in fact, it's incredibly highly likely you'll not remember any of these experiences. There's still a judgment of cruelty, to having an abortion late stage, and I think that is because there is the argument that at this point there are experiences that are happening, even if you don't remember them. Because if we're going to go down the line of, well, you're not going to remember the experience, so what the harm is caused, what if someone's got incredibly bad Alzheimer's and you could punch them in the face and 5 minutes later they won't remember being punched in the face? Have you harmed them? I'd still say that you have. Even though they don't remember it, they've still had that. And you could say the same thing about a baby. They might not remember the harm that's being done to them.
Yeah. I mean, it highly depends as well on what sort of view, I guess, if we want to talk about abortion at this point, it highly depends on sort of what you think is sort of a good defense of abortion if you're a pro-choice person, right? Because, like, for example, there are certain defenses that argue that it doesn't even matter really, if there are sort of feelings or not involved, right? Like for the violinist sort of scenario being one of them, right? That is, so you don't owe anything in that scenario. Even though you could argue that this other person that you're hooked up to is able to experience all of these things and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's a bit of a complicated topic.
We could always do a stream on it in the future.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. I'd love to.
So where do we go from here, Dave?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, Philip.
Well, no, go Philip.
Yeah.
No, I think we can at some point. I definitely want to go into this sort of ethics side of this, right? Because that's very interesting to me as well. But I guess I just wanted to share my intuition, and I don't know why I have this intuition to some extent. But I do think that, for example, like there are certain classes, right, of harms, if you will, right? I think we could all agree that, for example, a harm that you are aware of is worse than a harm that you are unaware of.
Yeah,
right? I think that's pretty obvious. I don't know if how much this counts for, right? Because you could argue that if you're being harmed, for example, by withholding a great fortune from you, right, versus a very minor harm that you're actually experiencing, though, that the vast fortune that you're not receiving, right, is a far greater harm, even if you're not aware of it, than the other one.
Yeah.
Although, like, I don't know, right?
Like for like, I think you're right there. If you on a balance, like for like harms. So if it was a fortune that you're aware you should be getting but don't, and one that you're not aware
worse,
of, but. Yeah, there's that balancing act there. I think with everything, it's a calculation, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how much that accounts for, because like part of me still thinks, I mean, it's still in this mindset that if I'm not aware of it, like it's, I mean, am I being harmed? Yes, I would say so, right? But I don't know. I just, like, for example, like this is my intuition, and of course, people might not share this, right? But if I think of, let's say I go to bed, right, and something happens in the middle of the night, and I just die suddenly, right, like in a nanosecond or something like that. to some extent, I genuinely, if I ask myself, I genuinely don't really care. I mean, I care now.
You'll never know.
Yeah, exactly. I care now from my perspective, right? If someone asked me, "Can I do this to you tonight?" Right, I would say no.
No, you
right? Because I'm aware of it, right? But like if it happened, like I don't know if I don't have this strong emotional reaction to that, because I don't feel like it like I would go to bed tonight, right, thinking that I'll wake up tomorrow. It wouldn't make it wouldn't make a difference at all to me, right? Like my experience would be exactly the same as I'm living it right now, whether or not in the next second I cease living or not, right? To some extent, I could, please don't. I could, like it's weird to me. Like I could even argue that I actually do fear greatly sort of the experience of being aware that I'm going to die, right? So, for example, getting some sort of illness or something like that. I'm terrified of that, and part of me thinks that it's just sort of it would be nice not to have that worry at all, in a weird way, right? So, like, there are a lot of intuitions that I have that, are a bit, I guess, maybe unusual, but. But they seem to paint a picture for me that makes me sympathetic to that view, even though I recognize that, from an observer's perspective, you could say that you're being harmed, right, in that scenario.
That's one thing I was going to mention, in that there's a difference between the person experiencing the harm and the outside observer seeing the harm. Yeah. And I think that's quite possibly the distinction here, in that death doesn't harm you as an experiencer, but from an outside observer who sees the loss, they can see that you have been harmed. Yeah, but this is also like kind of what I was talking about before, right? Because of course you would want to say that harms you if you're presented with the scenario. Why? Because you wouldn't want that to happen, right? Because exactly, because if such a scenario presented itself in the future, right, you would want that to happen, but that would mean that would impact your experience, right? You would want to have that experience. It's still about the experience, right, to some extent. But this is, you could, I guess, argue in a similar way, right? Like I wouldn't want to be killed because I want to have that experience, right, instead of not being there. But at the same time, this is more like about me trying to guarantee, like, that my future is going to be as good as like that my future experience path to some extent is going to be as good as possible, right? But if it actually went different in the case of death, especially, right, I don't know if I would care if something like this happened, right, to some extent. So that's why I'm sort of a bit weirded out by this. It's a hard intuition to get over. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. I mean, when I was studying it, I was in the same position as you. Like, well, if you're not feeling it or you're not suffering, what harm are you actually being caused? And it comes down to ideal observer, I guess, in that, well, if a person goes into a coma and we would say he suffered harm, even though the coma, to him it doesn't make a difference in the world, right? Like, so he's not being caused harm in the sense of an experience, but he has been caused harm. He's been deprived of future goods. I think the problem is the tangling of language. Yeah. So if you say untangle it a bit by saying you're not suffering, in other words, when you're dead, you can't suffer. And there's a distinction between suffering and being caused harm. Because, like we said, there is a form of harm by being robbed of potential experiences, especially if they're going to be better. So, I mean, what we summarized earlier, just for the people who've just chimed in, death doesn't necessarily cause you an experiential harm, but it could cause you a form of harm where life could be
better.
It's a comparative harm rather than an intrinsic harm.
And you could argue that it's also an improvement as well. So if you were in a situation where life was never going to get better, you were completely miserable, and actually death removed the suffering, you could argue that in that sense, death was an improvement to life. But in general, you would say that death probably causes a form of harm, even if not the suffering kind, as in experiential harm to the person.
But there is still like a very strong, like, you can feel the difference between, you know, like suffering and just being prevented something good, right? I think it's fairly intuitive to see that, right? You don't care as much if you don't get to experience something nice as you care about not getting to experience something terrible, I guess. Right? Like, you care much more about not experiencing something terrible than not experiencing, I guess, the loss of something good to some extent, right? Because that would leave you to a neutral state. So in that sense, I think that's maybe also like playing into the intuition that I have, right? Because I see sort of like this spectrum, right? Where you like, good things are nice, right? Nice to have, right? Like, I'm like, yeah, okay, if something nice happens and good happens, then I'm happy, right? But like, I really don't want the bad things to happen, right? That's what I really don't want to be, right? But if I'm sort of living on this side of the spectrum where, you know, things are neutral and then there are sort of occasional highs and stuff like that, I'm happy with that, right? As long as I can avoid this other side of the spectrum. But then death, essentially, you know, at worst, it leaves me in this sort of neutral state, right? Where, like, I would argue it's like, I would exist in that state anyway to some extent, right? I mean, maybe not anyway, right? Because I'm happy when I'm in a neutral state, right? But it's sort of a weird one for me, because I also would guarantee to never experience anything harmful, and I think this is sort of getting into this idea of antinatalism as well, right? Because there's sort of like an asymmetry that is proposed there, right, between things that are sort of bad. Or suffering and sort of the pleasure that you get gaining from things. And I don't find that entirely unconvincing, although I don't necessarily like antinatalism. But I do think that there's something there in this idea. And so maybe, you know, the idea of guaranteeing not to suffer is also like has some appeal in some sense, right? So yeah, it's a weird one.
Oh, no, it's understandable. Yeah. I kind of feel the same. Although now that I have Emma and I'm really happy, I worry that bit more than I used to when I didn't have these things.
Yeah, definitely. I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in states where I've longed for death as well. Because, like we're saying, on a comparative scale, death seems like an improvement to the way your life is going. And I mean, those thoughts still creep in from time to time. But I try and think big picture, macro scale when I'm in that state, and think that's generally not how I feel. I've just sunk into a hole and I'll pull myself out of it. But in that state, would you say that from the way you're thinking about this, Philip, if I'm in that hole, then at that moment in time, death is better, or is death not better? Because I'm going to pull myself out of that hole. Or is the fact that I will experience these holes from time to time, and they're a lot worse than not being in those holes on a comparative level again, that actually death is better because it prevents me from experiencing any of these holes ever again in the future?
Yeah, that's sort of an interesting question, right? And this gets very much into, I feel like, at least the antinatalist argument and stuff like that, right? Because there is this sort of idea going on that there is this asymmetry, right? That it's much worse to get tortured even for a little amount, right, than to experience any form of good, even the greatest good, right? Like the way wait a minute. What's the name of the philosopher that argues for antinatalism?
Jeff.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Oh my god, I'm having a
I want him to
brain
be called
fart
Jeff.
right now.
Yeah, I can't remember his name now.
Yeah, let me just get him up quickly.
He happens to like afternoon tea, and he has a wide range of biscuits. And by biscuits, we're talking
David Banta.
That was a bit of banter,
yeah, right? Like the way he essentially would express this, at least part of this discussion, is imagine being able to trade, right? Imagine that someone offers you the following trade, right? Like 10 minutes of the strongest bliss that you ever experienced in your life, right? The best time of your life, right? The most amazing pleasure that you could think of for 10 minutes, right? Followed by 10 minutes of the worst torture that you can imagine. Would you take that deal, essentially?
Yes.
Right. You would.
Yeah, at least once. Just to see, because if you're saying that I'm going to survive this as well, and there's going to be no like physical damage to me.
Yeah, let's say that you do.
Experiencing the best and the worst I can ever experience. I mean, life is about experience. So if I can have both of those experiences and be completely okay afterwards, yeah, wicked. What perspective that will give me on the rest of my life.
That's interesting.
I'd actually be able to really think about all the other experiences I'm having in my life, and I can say, well, at least it's not as bad as that. And okay, well, it's not quite as good as that, but it's pretty close. So that's a really good experience. But, this bad experience, oh, well, at least it's not as bad as that.
No, that's very interesting. That's very interesting because, like, to me, like, I don't share that intuition at all, right? Like, I would never get taught, like, just thinking of getting sort of burned alive for 10 minutes or something like that. I don't give a shit for, like, you can offer me whatever bliss you want. I wouldn't take that 10 minutes of torture regardless, right? It seems like that's sort of the point that he's trying to make, and I agree with him. Joe doesn't, and so you're getting out of this, I guess. But I agree with David on this point, right? That
if I was going to be completely, if I was going to be physically disfigured by it, and there'd be long-term damage from it, then that would change my experience. That you're not,
right? Like, but even if you're just completely restored, right, at the flip of a finger, I wouldn't take 10 minutes of the worst torture for 10 minutes of the biggest bliss. I wouldn't take it for the double that amount of bliss, honestly. Like,
definitely for double. Especially if I could do like 10 minutes before, 10 minutes torture, 10 minutes after. That'd be amazing.
Okay.
Cool. You'd basically be edging there, wouldn't you?
I've been stabbed before, and I wouldn't want to go through that again to feel something pleasurable.
Yeah.
No,
but you can at least compare other things to it and go, well, at least it wasn't as bad as getting stabbed.
Yeah,
but I'd rather have not gone through it.
10 minutes of the worst torture, like, just looking at like physical torture alone and what we humans are capable of, let alone what is actually possible. I think I wouldn't want to go through that, no matter what you would offer me on the other side, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know what I think of your example, Joe, of not getting into these sort of suffering holes, I guess. I don't know.
You're sort of leaning towards the idea that death would be better.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
You just don't want to say it. You just don't want to say it.
I don't know, because like there's always this sort of part of me, right, that is just excited about life, right, and that thinks that life is amazing, and that's I'm always hopeful for the future, right? I always think that, yeah, like the next amazing experience is just around the corner, right? So what if this is just a momentary sort of hole? I mean, of course, dying would get you out of that, but maybe you're sort of missing out on this on this next amazing thing, right? But
you'd be deprived.
Yeah, exactly. But then the question is really, how realistic are these sort of expectations, and how good are you at estimating these?
And do these holes not count as torture? And when the next best thing doesn't happen, and things don't improve as much as you hope, and from that regard, there is Another thing goes wrong, and another thought crops into your mind, and you fall into another hole. I mean, it's compounded, isn't it? Life's never as good as you want it to be.
Yeah, but this is like another point that like some philosophers would really like to make, right? That sort of humans are really bad at estimating these types of things, and that they have like a bias towards estimating that life is good. But actually, in reality, if you look at it objectively, sort of life is much worse than you would sort of estimate looking forth. There's sort of like an evolutionary maybe bias towards thinking that life is good, but in reality it's not as good. I don't know, like that argument,
the genes want to survive.
That argument is not as convincing to me. But like what is convincing to me, I think there's definitely an asymmetry. Like I'm pretty sure of that. Like I wouldn't take the worst torture the universe has to offer for the best, most amazing sort of bliss.
Even if, say, for the rest of your life you'd be in that bliss, you have to have the worst torture ever, and then for the rest of your life.
I honestly don't know. Like,
I definitely would.
If I just think about what it would mean to be tortured for 10 minutes, like in the worst possible way. I don't know. I don't know if I would take that.
I can imagine some pretty painful tortures.
Yeah,
and I haven't got the greatest imagination when it comes to that kind of stuff, but I couldn't imagine the equal pleasure.
Yeah, me neither. Maybe that's a failure of imagination as well, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's the thing, right? But even if you fail to imagine that, maybe then that suggests that as humans, we are more sort of
negative people. Because life is shit.
We have a natural aversion to the sort of suffering and pain because it's part of us and it's part of our evolutionary...
The genes want to survive. At the end of the day, the genes want to survive.
The fact that you can imagine that pain so much easier than the best thing, right? Maybe suggests something about the human condition. I don't know, right?
Yeah. Well, but we can experience pain quite regularly, but very rarely is there anything that will give you the feeling that even something like ecstasy can. Without taking a drug, it's hard to feel the sort of equivalent pleasure to types of pain. And I think that's possibly why addiction can be so high with people, because actually life is pain.
That's what they say. Life is suffering.
So, I mean, on that note, if life is suffering, then death is always better.
Oh boy.
And we've just basically completely invalidated everything we've said up until now on the stream. But yeah, there's a few comments in the chat, and I do apologise, folks, for missing these. Please say them again. But we've got one from Luke. He says, does anyone else get the existential dread about the human race not existing in the future? I do, even though I know it certainly won't go extinct in my lifetime. Not necessarily about the human race not existing. I would say I sometimes think about things like, the sun going through another phase and basically causing gravity to change to a point where it swallows the world, or a black hole or something like that. But not necessarily about the human race not existing. I hope that we are one day replaced by a much better species.
Dogs.
Yes. They evolve and take over us, and we become their pets and eventually get wiped out.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love Planet of the Apes, because it's that kind of scenario.
It's actually good. I mean, watching the older ones, they are so much better than the newer Planet of the Apes as well. The newer ones have basically removed the core story and like the philosophical concepts and
they
everything.
changed the actual philosophy behind it. It's more about identity and what it means to be a person, rather than bringing up the past of humans and how they've treated others and animals and things like that.
Interestingly, Randolph said a similar thing. I wonder if Homo sapiens sapiens will evolve into a different species before that. Eventually, our solar system is expected to get destroyed. So, I mean, I think our lines of thinking are similar there. I do agree. I hope we evolve into a better species, or we get taken over by a better species. And I also hope that we do get to a point where we see in a lot of sci-fi where we get the chance to leave our solar system and colonize other worlds, and that again will make us evolve, because we'll be under different pressures and the like. Luke also says, this is the thing with suicides. It isn't always the depression. Some people have rational reasons which is sad. And I mean, you're right. There are plenty of things that do crop up that can make you sit there and tally up things and go, this is the better option. And that is what we were discussing, is the fact that death isn't always necessarily going to be causing you a harm. So taking the experiential harm away from it, there are times where death could be seen as an improvement. Sorry, just scrolling down the rest of the things. If you guys want to continue whilst I'm continuing to read through them and see if there's anything else that we need to bring up.
Something about a desert man, Philip?
Yeah. We can talk about that next. I think that would be sort of the ethics discussion around this, right? Because let's suppose for now, I mean, the simplest thing would be to suppose that, Epicurus was right about his view on death, right? So that there is really nothing to fear about death, and that the person is not being harmed in any way because it doesn't impact their experiences at all. Okay, so what does that mean for our sort of ethics to some extent? And I don't know exactly if Luke said. I mean, he gave this example, and I think it was pretty good. But I'm trying to sort of remake it as closely as possible, but I'm not going to be perfect. So please, Luke, don't hate on me.
Who cares about Luke? He likes pseudoscience anyway.
Yeah, like psychology and stuff.
Yeah, not real science at all.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, I guess the example was something like, let's imagine a man, right, in a desert, and you're there next to him, and this man is, you can sort of make different hypotheses or different thought experiments, I guess, in the same kind of scenario. Let's say that he's sort of like suffering to make it easier, even among us, right? Because we sort of agreed that in certain cases, right, at least death could be seen as an improvement. So maybe that could be the easiest way to think of this, right? Let's say that you are in the desert. Nobody is ever going to find out anything that you did, right? Nobody is aware of this man even existing, right? So going to be no harm caused by this sort of man not existing anymore because nobody knows him, let's say. Okay, so this man is suffering, right? You have the opportunity to Thanos snap him away in a nanosecond. Right?
Before you continue, important question. What color hair does that man have?
So I think white, right?
Because he's in the desert.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, because of course with black hair everything changes, right? But I mean, of course, white hair I think is that's the example we're going with. So with a man with white hair, right? So you have the opportunity to Thanos snap him away. Now, is this the thing that you should do ethically? Right, and you could even extend it in a simplistic way, right? If there is truly nothing bad about death, right? If you completely accept sort of the Epicurean view, then is it okay to kill someone that is sort of causing suffering, right? If it's an instant and they are not even aware of it, like Thanos snap, people just die, right? Essentially. I mean, I guess like the easy way out of this is if it happens, within a context where other people are aware of it, especially if this person has family and stuff. I think it's very easy for a utilitarian, for example, but even other sort of ethical systems to say that this is bad because, there are other people that suffer as a consequence of you doing this. But you can have various sort of examples where this is sort of mitigated or non-existent. I think, I mean, there are various examples in literature even of sort of these things that come close to this. So we can discuss those as well if we want to. But I guess we can go just to our sort of white-haired desert man as a starting point.
I would say yes, it's still wrong to do it, because you could always just put him on a plane and take him back to civilization and increase his happiness.
Okay.
See, my problem is I don't take the Epicurean thing to be true, but if we say it is true, I suppose you could argue you've not done him any harm because you've removed his suffering, but there is a more ethical way to remove his suffering. And if we're speaking of ethics, then it's better to go with the most ethical choice.
Yeah.
If you can't take him back to civilization with you, then yes, if you could end his suffering in the snap, it's probably better to just end his suffering with that snap.
I think to tie it back to a stream ages ago, we were talking about the Thanos snap. And with all that power, we said, well, there's probably more that you could do. Instead of just wiping out half the universe and it robbing people of all of the experience that they could have, especially it being done at totally random. It wasn't done on people who were either evil or were absolutely miserable. Or whatever, it was actually just done completely at random. There is a lot of experience that's robbed from people, and with all that power, there are better options that you could take. And I think, like you say there, Dave, is the fact that, well, is there another option for the person in the desert? Could we do anything else? If the answer is like, no, there's absolutely nothing else we can do for them, well, I mean, then it becomes sort of a mercy killing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But if
sort of like euthanasia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if it's not,
then things are a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit different. Yeah.
But I mean, how did you get to the desert? Couldn't you just take him back the same way you came?
Yeah, I mean, or even if you live in the desert and you can't get out of the desert yourself, but you've lived in the desert that long, well, surely you're not suffering in this situation, so surely there is a way you could show this person to live in the desert and be happy. Or at least stop their suffering and, improve in some way.
I mean, stopping the suffering is good. Obviously, it's it would be the main good to be had here. But it comes down to options. Can you reduce his suffering through a better means than killing him and ending his life and depriving him of future experiences? If there isn't, then euthanasia would be the way to go.
Think about taking your pet to the vet and it's got a broken leg and it needs surgery to survive. And it's going to cost a bit of money, but, it's going to have a pin in its leg and it'll be fine and, be pretty much full recovery. Or you can get it put to sleep. It's the same sort of situation. There's a better option than killing your pet. And whether you think morality extends past humans or not, you could still at least make a judgment and say that it's still better for your pet to survive this situation than not, even though it's going to cost you a bomb to get it done. I would tend to say morality does extend past humans, but that's probably a completely different topic as well.
I say we kill Luke so that he stops putting people in the desert, causing them suffering.
mean, apparently Luke had a different scenario, with a person that was actually happy with his life, and sort of you're a psychopath, so you wouldn't suffer any negative consequences as a result of killing him, right? So the question was, is it wrong to kill this person, right? In some extent. And I think, depending on how you view the Epicurean sort of scenario, right? If you think that he cannot be harmed by death, then to some extent you haven't harmed him, right? There are no negative consequences. It would be at least a neutral situation. So to some, that would be the thing that you're trying to get at if someone subscribes to the Epicurean view of death, at least sort of in its original form. I guess you could sort of modify these examples, and even if you take the Epicurean view of death to be correct, you could sort of argue that this is wrong to some extent, right? Though the desert scenery makes it hard to do so, right? Because you can always sort of I tend to think of it always as in a consequentialist framework, right? But as a consequentialist framework within society, you could always argue that doing so, even though in that scenario it might have been sort of a net positive action, right? Even or neutral action, sort of having society accept that as a okay thing to do would cause sort of psychological pressure and harm, because everyone would be aware that they could be killed at any moment, because at the end of the day it doesn't matter, something like that. So that would be sort of a negative consequence of that action being deemed moral. But of course, if it's in the desert, that's always sort of a hard thing to.
It isolates it, yeah.
Yeah, to argue for. But I think if we all agreed at the end of the day that he would be harmed, right, to some extent. I wouldn't say that he would be harmed as much as if he was aware of the thing, but there is some harm being done here. And you pointed out that there could be alternatives, and I think if there are no alternatives and you could know the future, right, then I think I suspect that we all share sort of similar views on euthanasia, or however it is called, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we would all consider that to be ethical. So then sort of our views align, right? There's no sort of controversial thing. I guess if you want really to make a consequentialist annoyed or something like that, you could make the scenario even worse, like to some extent, right? You could make it so that this person is causing harm to others, right? Sort of has a negative impact, and maybe you have the opportunity to kill it painlessly in isolation, right? So nobody would ever find out and stuff like that. So I think to some extent this is similar to Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, of course, because the killing there occurs in a bit more brutal way.
Yeah.
We should say than what we are describing here. But let's imagine sort of the same scenery, right? Like the person that was killed was described as being sort of having a very strong negative impact on the surrounding sort of people, right? And under this view, you wouldn't be really harming this person. And on top of that, if you had the opportunity to do so sort of without causing them pain in the process, right, then there wouldn't be harm in that setting either. And of course, we know that then this causes great psychological pain to the actual protagonist, right? So that wouldn't go as planned. But if you could remove that as well, maybe because, as Luke suggested, it's a psychopath or something like that, then I guess things could be argued to be a bit more grey, at least if you accept the Epicurean view of death as is.
Luke actually
Yeah,
brings
absolutely.
something up about a game, saying there's a game called Vampire where you play a vampire and you can choose to kill people in the world, and killing some of them has a net positive effect on the world that you're in, and it makes the game really interesting from a moral perspective. And I have to say, when I play a role-playing game, I sort of put myself in that headspace because I like to end up being some sort of supernatural character. I try and find a vampire to infect me. So like when I play the Elder Scrolls games, I become a vampire, but I will choose to kill certain people, but I will try and kill only evil people. And I know it's not a real world, and I know it's not a real moral calculation in it because it's all just simulated in that regard, but it's still the way I think about things within the realm of the game. So if we could say that killing someone would create a net positive in the real world, would we say that death is doing harm because they're not experiencing death themselves and they are only going to be causing harm to others? Could we?
Oh, boy.
Obviously, I still think that there is a genuine harm being done there. I don't necessarily agree with killing people, especially in the real world, but you can understand how certain justifications like that are made.
Yeah, you can understand that. I do think that there is sort of a case to be made, as I sort of suggested before, that even if you subscribe to this view, you can sort of say that certain things are still bad. But it gets a lot harder to sort of find, like, it's very easy to sort of corner you, I suppose, with these sort of extreme examples that admittedly are very unlikely to occur, right? So sort of from a practical perspective, you probably still have very good grounds to stand on to say that, no, you shouldn't do any of this, right? It's still immoral. But there are sort of hypothetical scenarios that are a bit sort of actually strongly counterintuitive, and I think lead you to wrong conclusions. So I think the Epicurean view of death is not probably entirely correct, although I think that we can learn a lot from it, and I do think that it has sort of some great intuitions that I do share, although not entirely.
I think it's one of those views that gets something right, but doesn't get the whole picture.
Yeah, I agree.
I am thinking about it. I'm stuck on my previous question. Could we say under certain forms of utilitarianism that you would be causing greater pleasure through your calculation, through your by killing someone who causes others suffering?
Do you watch Dexter?
Yes.
Or did you ever watch the original series of Dexter?
I didn't watch season 7, and I am tempted to watch season 7 now. Season 8 is out, so. But it got to a point where it's too unrealistic. But the first sort of like 3-4 seasons were amazing.
The first 3 or 4 seasons, yeah. I mean, Dexter suffered no psychological harm from what he was doing, and to some extent, he got a bit of pleasure out of it. And he was only killing people that kind of deserved to die. And he would medicate them first so that they didn't actually feel pain, was what he was doing wrong.
Yeah.
You rooted for him. You rooted for him, though, didn't you? You rooted for him. When later on, when he started killing good people or people that found out for him, you'd definitely say that was 100% wrong. But some of the people who slipped through the cracks and were going to go on and do more harm to others, the legal system had failed. There's no way to get justice in that I can see an argument. I'd say it's almost a problem of dirty hands. You know, he's doing something
Doing wrong to do
immoral.
right.
Yeah. So yes, what he's doing is wrong, but does it do right overall? Given the parameters that we are given within the first few seasons, yes. As it went on, much less so.
Yeah, I mean, does a serial killer that only targets serial killers, is he doing wrong? I would say yes, because he's harming others, but he's also reducing the amount of harm.
In the world,
look, I think you can run the same argument. I think you can run the same argument, Dave, that you mentioned before, which I think is very effective, right? And it's about alternatives.
Yeah.
Right. If there exists an alternative that sort of removes the same amount of harm or sort of close to the same amount of harm, without all of these sort of other negative consequences that you might get from this, because there are negative consequences that you might get from this, if not anything else, because, you know, judging something as moral like this has consequences, right? Then, you know, you ought to take the option that does the same but has bad consequences, right? So in that scenario, I think he was still doing something that is immoral because of the other available options.
But there weren't other available options in the first few seasons, though, were there? That was the point. They'd gone through the whole legal system, and no matter what happened, these people kept on getting away with it, whether it was corrupt judges or bribes, or just, you know, that there wasn't enough evidence, or corrupt cops that got rid of the evidence, or whatever it was. There wasn't anything else that could necessarily be done from a legal perspective, and this is why I think it's a problem of dirty hands, because I still think what he's doing is wrong, but he's doing the wrong thing with the best possible outcome, and it's sort of the only path. It's either he lets harm continue to others, or he does this harm, and there's still this harm being done, and then there isn't harm done to others. And if that's your two options, I think that you can actually say you've got a genuine problem of dirty hands there. And
I would agree, but at the same time, like, there's still distinctions in how you want to remove harm, right? Like, you can play vigilante in different ways, in a sense, right? You can go around killing people directly, or you can sort of, I don't know, if you don't want to arrest them because you don't trust the legal system, you could still, I don't know,
set them up.
Yeah, or put them in a cell somewhere that you're running, or whatever, right? Like, there are many ways to deal with this.
I don't know. So putting them in a cell, I'd say, is possibly worse. You know, I'd say putting them in a cell, like solitary confinement for the rest of their life, is probably worse than killing them. But setting them up, I mean,
depending
if you could
on how
do it,
I mean, you wouldn't presumably argue for the death as capital punishment, right?
No, of course not.
Yeah, so I guess you.
But
I
also wouldn't. I wouldn't say solitary confinement. I think the prison system.
No, but I didn't talk about solitary confinement either, right?
Oh, like, you said put them in a cell that you have. If it's your cell that you have, and it's not the prison system, because they're not going to be going into it, I can imagine there aren't going to be many people in this cell, or it's going to be an incredibly overcrowded
the details
cell.
Of that are not being really defined, right? Like, you can organize it however you want. You could even organize it in the same way as the prison system. I would imagine you would need more people, right? But if you wanted to, right? I didn't. When I said put them in a cell, I didn't like mean this sort of like in a solitary confinement way. Even then, I'm not exactly sure if it would be worse to kill them or not. But I would be certainly more open to the possibility that it might be better to kill someone and put them in solitary confinement, though I'm not exactly sure if that's true. Yeah. But regardless, my sort of idea was not your idea, I guess. It was just that the idea that, you know, killing is not necessarily the only option. I mean, I would suppose, at least, it's not the only option. If that was the only option for some other reason, then I would agree with you. Then there is like this problem of dirty hands at play.
Luke says the only thing I disagree with is that the only reason he's doing it is for his enjoyment. He chooses his victims in order to feel like what he's doing is morally okay. I mean, that he was given that creed by his father, wasn't he? That was how he was, allowed to kill someone. And I agree. I mean, I don't think what he's doing is morally okay. This is why I say it's a problem of dirty hands. And I think you're right, Philip. I think in some situations there could be a better option. I think in some situations there might not have been a better option at the same time, but without examining each one with a fine-tooth comb, we wouldn't really know which. Which is why I felt at the beginning there are a lot more situations where it did feel like it was the only option that could take. And I think it's why you sort of bought into the premise of this guy, and you liked him and you felt for him. And as time went on, you were already tied to the character. And even though he was doing things that if it was the first thing you saw, you'd have been like, no way, you started making excuses and going, well, he's only done this once. It's not really that bad. Because like when he did this, it was okay. But this, well, hopefully he won't do it again. You would not have made that sort of justification if you hadn't already bought into the premise at that point of being like, yeah, that one deserved, yeah. It's quite clever the way it did that as well. Sorry, Dave, go on.
I was just going to say, yeah, that was one of the genius things about it. And it also sort of put you in the place of a mother who finds out that their child is a serial killer. Because it's like, well, or you find out your friend is a serial killer. Well, he's not a bad guy. He's just slipped up this once. Whereas if you weren't engaged with that character, you would have gone, oh, no, he's a nasty piece of work.
And it teaches you about bias that you can really have for your friends or your own tribe, as it were, and how you do make excuses for people you're close to that you wouldn't if they were someone that was completely distant to you. But
that happens a lot in TV, to be fair, right? Like, I think a lot of TV is very, I mean, you root for characters that do some nasty stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
Because they're the main character, because you're sort of trying to see it through their eyes, right? And even though you recognize that that's probably, actually, sometimes even certainly immoral, you're still sort of rooting for the character because it's the main character and because the story is woven around this character.
Yeah, but very rarely are they a serial killer in that regard. Like they might be doing wrong things. They might be a criminal. It might be a gangster or something like that who occasionally has to kill someone or beat someone up for something. But very rarely have you bought into a serial killer and, found that sort of connection. And I
think that's fair.
I think that's a mark of good TV when you can connect with someone that is so different to you. But yeah.
It's also the mark of good art.
Yeah.
At least in the drama tragedy sort of sense.
Yeah, it could apply to anything. I mean, if you're reading a book or listening to an audio tape or good writing and as you say, good art. Luke says Anakin Skywalker. No, do you know what? No one identified with him because he was a whiny little bitch that got upset and just went and killed a load of kids. See, they should have built up to it a bit better. Everybody buy into the character and then have a psychotic break. We'd have been like, oh my God. We've got to really understand him. But no, he did that and we were like, fuck him, kill him. Everyone, just kill him. And knowing full well they weren't going to for another 3 movies.
Yeah, it was very abrupt, right? That was the problem of that. There was no sort of it seemed completely random, and so nobody cared.
Oh dear. So, from a moral perspective, then I think that we can say that it depends. Like we said earlier about the the judgment on whether death causes harm or not. We, but at least in an experiential way, or could it be an improvement? We could also say the same thing from a moral perspective, that death could be immoral, but maybe not. And we could possibly say causing someone death is permissible, not necessarily morally permissible.
I mean, it is permissible in some settings, right? We would all agree that in self-defense it's permissible, right? In some
certain kinds of war.
Yeah. So there are certain scenarios where it's permissible, but I don't know. But like, I guess it really depends on the scenario, when it's permissible, when it's not.
I don't think it's the death itself that is moral or immoral, though. It's the actions that bring about the death. Like if somebody died of natural causes, you wouldn't say that was immoral, that he was
unless you're T-jump.
Yeah. let's not talk about that.
Yeah, right. That's
dying of natural causes is no more immoral than an avalanche killing you.
Yeah, but that's also immoral.
Yeah, we got avalanches.
Yeah, let's not talk about
that.
Yeah, let's not talk about that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't help but enjoy that in some way, shape, or form. So I always bring it back to that. Sorry. So do you think there's much more that we need to consider about the Epicurean view on death?
No, I think there's been some pretty good discussion, and it's brought about some different ideas on how to look at it and the difference between suffering and harm, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, that's also a very interesting one. Avalanches are definitely atheists as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Luke? Oh no,
no,
that was Paul.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Both as an entity, and they are composed of other atheists as well. So
a multi-atheist.
Yeah. On different levels.
What's the phrase? Turtles all the way down? Well, in this case, it's atheists all the way down.
Yep.
Well, turtles would be atheists as well. So
yeah, they would. Yeah.
Have you asked them?
Yeah. Well, they're not capable of holding the belief, so therefore, under Ra's definition,
I mean, maybe they are capable of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it just takes them so long to say yes that you're dead by the time they answer. Because they're a bit slow.
They are. Yeah, they are.
Could be. But no, avalanches are not atheists. Yeah. God. Cool. Sorry, my head's exploding with that argument again. I really want to avoid the whole rocks are atheist thing. It's funny when people bring it up on our stream, because obviously they're all of the same opinion to us, that it's an incredibly ridiculous argument. But after I get over the funny side of it from someone saying it, it then puts me back into it's almost like PTSD, man. It's not. It's nowhere near as bad as PTSD. I apologize if that was insensitive to anyone out there who does actually suffer with PTSD. I'm just saying that I am slightly traumatized by Aaron Ra's terrible takes. But yes, so yeah, I think there has been a lot of interesting conversation tonight. It's fun to think about things in different ways and almost go over yourself and actually look at the situation and go, well, yeah, it'd be wrong in this way, and then you compare it to this, which you then realize is the same, and you're saying no over here and yes over here, and okay, there's some inconsistency between what we're saying here. So what's the difference between the two situations? There's no difference, right? So it's actually a contradiction, or no, this is the single difference between the two, so we can't, It's why I enjoy these sorts of conversations that we have here. And so thank you both very much for tonight. And thank you both for suggesting the conversation as well at different times.
It's what I love, yeah. If anyone wants to look deeper into it, I would suggest looking up Jeff McMahon's stuff, Shelley Kagan, Thomas Nagel, and Don Marquis.
Awesome. I'd say that we're going to put it in the comments for you, but it won't happen because we always forget. But yes, and thank you everybody who joined us, especially those who joined in the chat and asked some questions. I do apologize if I didn't get to all of them. And thank you very much to everybody who has checked this out on the rerun or on a podcast or something like that. Don't forget, tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. GMT, 2:30 p.m. Eastern American time. Luke, as in Bearded Heretic, will be doing a video on his channel, and I think he's having a conversation about scientism. And Philip has been dragged into being on that one, and I know you all love Philip, so make sure you go and support him. And also, if Philip doesn't turn up, you've got to give him hell for at least 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. I've locked myself up.
Yeah. We're also going to be doing a stream on the Ravens Paradox. That's going to be Thursday about 9 p.m. GMT. And basically we're going to be talking about how I've got a red shirt on. And that's what we're going to tell you.
You have the wrong shirt on tonight. That's not the appropriate one.
But yes, awesome. Guys, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we finish for the night?
No, that was perfect. That was a brilliant stream. Thank you both.
Awesome.
Yeah, but we should definitely sort of follow up with certain things that we touched on tonight, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it would be very interesting to talk about antinatalism and stuff like that.
Definitely. I mean, they're always interesting topics, and I know we love going over them and getting far too deep. And I know sometimes that other people don't like taking things quite as deep as we do, but I'm up for it. All you need to do is add them to our ClickUp, don't you?
Yeah. So from now on, you won't forget to put in the references that Dave mentions. I'll just
assign it to Dave. It's all going to go on to Dave. It's all his problem now.
I already get enough homework.
You're on like a 3-month break, aren't you?
Yeah. You're depriving me of future goods by making me do these things because I could be watching television instead.
You can watch television at the same time. You've got a laptop.
No, I haven't got that kind of focus.
Awesome. Okay, anyway, as I said, thank you guys for being here. I've really enjoyed the conversation. You've been watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
I'm Epicurus.
And I'm Philip.
Have a good night, all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.